Today, we're diving into the story of Camplify. They've got aspirations to do what Airbnb did to the home rental space to the RV and camper van space. We've all seen the rise of different forms of platforms, whether it's Airbnb itself or Uber, really driving connectivity and networks around. And Camplify have the opportunity to do that. They've recently come off some really strong results, over 90% growth in revenue over the past financial year. And there's a range of different tailwinds as well behind the sector. We all know about the rise of digitization, but obviously with border closures, there's been changing travel trends as well. Looking forward to unpacking the story with the CEO and Managing Director of Camplify, Justin Hales. Justin, welcome to the channel, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. Before we discuss all of the recent news, the results, it'd be great just to have that overview. Who's Camplify and really what's that problem that you're trying to solve in the space?
Yeah, so we're often described that Camplify is a bit like Airbnb, but for caravans, camper vans, motorhomes, camper trailers. So, we're really the marketplace that connects those two parties together. We make it really seamless and easy for the two parties to connect. So, someone who owns an RV together with someone who wants to use an RV, whether it be to go away on holidays or you name it. So, we provide all the things in the middle that those two parties need. So that include insurances, rental contracts, manage the funds, provide the booking engine, do the marketing, we're the power behind that transaction. And we make it safe and secure to do so. And so we make it really easy for both parties to be able to execute on that.
And to really conceptualize that for perhaps viewers who might not have used platforms before, what is that real step change in terms of the current delivery method and Camplify, and why is it so useful in comparison to just being able to purchase those vans on their own?
Yeah, well, I guess before we existed, really, the main way that people would rent a vehicle, for example, would be through a traditional channel, like someone like Apollo or Brits or Maui, or those brands that people might have heard of before and seen those vans on the road. But those businesses primarily service the inbound tourist market. So they were aimed really at people who were landing in Australia, wanting to rent a van and do that trip. So, typically speaking, when you see those vans on the road or come across someone in a caravan park with one of those vans, they might be, a German tourist or, someone from an overseas market. Those businesses really weren't servicing the domestic tourist. And so as a domestic tourist, and, the reason I first found a need for this was, I myself live in Newcastle. If I wanted to hire a van from one of these traditional outlets, I would need to drive to Sydney to the international airport, pick up a van from that location, go on my holiday, return it, and then get back to Newcastle. And that model just doesn't work for domestic. And so, what we've managed to do is to create this kind of spider web approach where we have lots and lots of vans in lots and lots of neighborhoods around the country, all listed on the platform. And so you're able to find something to be in. And that's where I really got the idea from, is that, I was looking at all these vans parked in my local neighborhood every afternoon as I was walking the dog and thinking, I'd like to be able to rent one of these caravans from my neighbor. And I wasn't able to do that. So that's really how I came up with the idea. And so, we've really just looked at what are all the things that those two parties need to be able to actually execute on that transaction. And it's not just as easy as knocking on someone's door and saying, hey, can I take your van away? So there's lots of things that need to happen to be able to execute on that. And so we've been able to do all of those things to make sure that that can work. And I think, the other key thing around that is that not everyone wants to rent a motorhome. People want to rent lots and lots of different types of vehicles. And that's what Camplify provides to our customer, whether it be a motorhome or a camper van or a camper trailer or a caravan or you name it. It's really the choice that we provide the consumer. And that's really driven by the response that we've had to the platform.
For sure, that all makes sense. And of course, the domestic side intuitively makes sense. But of course, with the border closures that we've seen, that's only really exacerbated those problems. I'd love just to talk about those trends that you've seen over the past couple of years. We know with the lockdowns, how have you seen the adoption in terms of customers?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. We obviously went through the initial sort of period of, lots of concern about tourism and, when were people going to be able to travel again and the restrictions that were in place. And so, we went through that period of, not being able to have any customers. And then as we saw state border closures. We saw local LGA closures. But through that whole period, what we did see was a strong desire from customers to have travel as part of their everyday lifestyle. Whether it be impact of COVID or impact on financial pressures on the household budget, travel for Australians is part of what we do. We want to be able to have that travel. And so as we saw people come out of these restricted lockdowns and being able to go on short breaks, the adoption was enormous. And we actually saw customers recover really quickly and say, I've been cooped up in my house or my apartment for 6 to 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on where you were in the country. And I want to then get out and do something. And so we were naturally a really great way for people to be able to do that. We're an easy holiday to do. We were able to organise at short notice. We're able to have huge distribution. It's relatively low cost compared to other travel options, but it's also self-contained and self-isolating. So it's the sort of perfect environment for those customers coming out of that COVID period to be able to do that.
Yeah, all of that makes sense. And then, of course, you really see that evidence throughout the numbers. Your full year results have just come through, past that milestone, $50 million on the TTV side. So congratulations for that. Revenue up by over 90% as well, increasing take rate. Did you want to walk us through those numbers and what you think those key highlights were for investors to follow?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting the last few years seeing that growth rate in GTV is one of the key things. We've grown that by sort of over 60% at a CAGR level, sort of over 80% the last few years. And so through those periods with that really strong growth, we've seen, before it was COVID, it was bushfires. Then we've had COVID, then we've had floods, then we've had restricted lockdowns. I think during the last 2 years, for example, where we've had that extremely strong growth, we've experienced over 18 regional lockdowns. So the business has been very resilient around that, and we actually haven't had a full year where we've had no restrictions. These results really reflect how supportive the people are to the business, and really we're looking forward to having an even stronger summer this year. But we've had as great, as you mentioned, GTV growth numbers up to 53.6 million. Our revenues sitting at just under 17 million, so 16.36 million. Been growing at 93%. Total bookings of just under 40,000 bookings. Average booking values sitting at 1240. Our retained customers, so that people who are rebooking through the platform, sitting at 25%. We've grown that in the last 12 months by 5%, so we're sitting at 20% before that. And that really means, when you break it down, 1 in 4 customers is rebooking another holiday with us, which is a great result. And it's an area that we're really focused at. Around 10,000 vehicles on platform. And we might just drill down into take rate for a second. Take rate sitting at 30.5%. That's up from just over 25% the previous year. So we've grown that quite significantly. And I think unlike other marketplaces, we haven't done that by just increasing fees. We've actually grown that by adding additional product into the marketplace that our customers want and need. And we build product based on our customer feedback. So we talk to them and say, what are the other things that you would like to see? What are the things that you need? And then we build product around that. And that product that we're building is helping us to increase that take rate. So, we're unlike other marketplaces that, typically, particularly, even ones that are traded on the ASX, you'll see them, roughly sitting at somewhere between 18 to 22%. And so, we sit well above that from a take rate perspective. And we also sit at a much higher average booking value than the average marketplace. So that means we're getting a really good transaction cut for every transaction back to Camplify. And it gives us this really strong base to grow from. And we've been growing that take rate by increasing those products. So that's something that we really want to focus more on, is really servicing the customer, making their life easier, providing them more services and products, and clipping the tick along the way.
For sure. And of course, it'll be difficult for anyone to really forecast where things are heading. We've talked about the macroeconomic uncertainty already, but a good leading indicator and a bit of a proxy about where things might head is the future bookings numbers. Did you want to talk about that and kind of the catalyst up ahead that you're really working towards?
Yeah, absolutely. So we closed out the previous financial year with future bookings at 6.95 million. And we've already mentioned that we've grown through that period and got to that 53.6 million. So we've had really good growth. So the future bookings is where we start at from what we've got secured in our pipeline. So we recognise our revenue based on when a booking occurs, but we're taking bookings in advance. And so that's how we understand and measure those future bookings. So we closed out FY22 with 14.79 million in future bookings. So a much bigger amount of secured existing bookings. And we're able to see those other business drivers that we also look at, such as traffic patterns, booking requests, all of those things in a stronger position than what they were in the previous 12 months. So that, for us, provides a great leading indicator as to where we expect the business to go to, and that we're confident that we can manage to maintain those level of growth patterns that we've been at previously, because we've already got such a strong pipeline in the business, and those patterns are already occurring as well.
And just to finish on as well, you've got 4 different regions at the moment. Obviously, the bulk of the revenue is coming through in Australia. I'm assuming you'd like to continue to diversify that out, but would like to talk about the longer term plans and the aspirations for where things are heading from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Australia, represents roughly just under 90% of our overall business. Previously that was sitting at about 94%. So we've managed to grow the other regions as well, at a faster rate than we've grown Australia, even though Australia's grown at, sort of that 60 to 90% mark. So, really pleased with how those other regions have been, growing. We've had really strong growth in every market. I think, looking at markets like New Zealand, for example, they've been probably one of the most hard impacted in terms of that regional lockdowns. So, really that tourism market in New Zealand really relies on inbound market to service that, and particularly Australians going to that market. We've had in that 12 months really a very, very tiny, like 1 month of actual ability for people to go to that market, and it was in winter. So, we're still seeing 60% growth in that market. And so we're really looking forward to what we can do this year in New Zealand. We think that, that market's really, really primed to, recover really well from a travel perspective now that those borders are opened, and people are wanting to travel again. But in other markets, we've seen really strong growth in UK. We've seen extremely strong growth in Spain. It's been one of our best performing markets in terms of growth. And so, we're really building those other markets in a really strong way. And the Australian market remains, a great, strong market for us. And I think in every market we're in, there's so much more potential growth to go. Really, when you look at the overall amount of vehicles that we have in market and the amount on platform, we're still sort of under 2% of total vehicles. So we've got a huge amount of more vehicles to go on the platform. And we're a marketplace that is not constrained by people wanting to go away on holidays. We're constrained by the amount of fleet that we have. More fleet that we have, more vehicles on the platform equals more bookings, more GTV, more satisfied, happy customers. So, as we build more and more and we get this compounding effect of vehicles on the platform, then we're able to continue to see those growth patterns emerge.
That is the Camplify story. It's ASX CHL. If you've enjoyed it, feel free to share it out. Make sure you've liked and subscribed. We'll leave another link to an interview that you can check out up above. Justin Hales, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time on the channel.
Thank you.